He is sort of much more than a vampire. He is this force of nature. He is like literally death himself. And like you honestly don't know kind of where Orlok ends and the plague begins. It is
Right.
like he brings the plague, he is the plague.
You get the sense that von Franz, he's kind of bringing a knife to a gunfight. Like, he's using this very Christian kind of occultism with Paracelsus and Agrippa and kind of ad hoc exorcisms. But Orlok is something much older.
I've got very particular ideas about sort of like Dracula as a story. So, there's nitpicks that I have, like, I guess, but I feel like those are just very much outweighed by the emotional experience of watching this movie and how there's like feelings and images from it that have like stayed with me, like after the fact, and that I like keep thinking about. Like, that's what I think is like makes for truly impactful cinema.
The first image we get of Nosferatu or Orlok is this huge, hulking,
Yeah, yeah,
he's
yeah.
9 feet tall, and at the end,
Yeah,
he's
yeah, precisely.
shriveled, impotent.
There's a phallic kind of sort of, yeah, read on that too.
In the classic romantic tradition, right, what we get the intrusion of the irrational, that we get the intrusion into our world that is very carefully curated, the sublime. The sublime is all about how it overwhelms the human being. And it's not pleasant, it's unpleasant, it's highly scary.
When we talk about sort of historical authenticity and historical detail in a fiction film, I think it's not just there to like, oh, look how smart I am and look how much of a nerd I am about this stuff. It's there to sort of add depth to the characters and add sort of a reality and a truth to the characters.
Yo, real quick, before we get to the discussion, I just wanted to let y'all know that Atun Shea Films is primarily viewer supported. It's how we can afford to build insane, elaborate sets in the studio, like this luxury train car with all sorts of pictures of American political luminaries on the walls. So if you enjoy Atun Shea Films and appreciate the work that we do here, I hope you'll consider joining us on Patreon. Patrons gain access to behind-the-scenes material, an exclusive Discord server, bonus videos, and more. Other great ways to help the channel would be to give a one-time donation via PayPal, to buy merch or memorabilia from our online store, or to buy or rent The Sudbury Devil, our historical feature film. You can find links to all that stuff down in the description or over on my website, atunshayfilms.com.
So when I saw Nosferatu 2024, the Robert Eggers version, I knew that the person I wanted to talk to about it was my buddy Justin Sledge of the channel Esoterica. For my money, the best, and in a lot of cases, the only source on YouTube for the academic study of the occult. So yeah, if anybody has not subscribed yet to Justin's channel, please do. It's an absolute gold mine. And yeah, thank you so much for being here today, Justin, to talk to me about this wonderful film.
Yeah, I'm stoked. It's, when I saw it, I had to I went in knowing there would be some occult stuff, and I was like, all right, am I going to watch the movie or am I going to like esoteric the movie? And I was like, no, I need to just watch the movie and enjoy it and not, try to be the Leonardo DiCaprio meme where it's just like, it's always what, to my mind, Robert Eggers does very well is create these kind of like fever dream environments where we never really learn why Nosferatu or Orlok is summoned. We never really learn how he became this thing. We never really understand completely the relationship of Orlok and El. And it's the same thing with the witch. It's a sort of like fever dream environment. And to me, I think that's just the best environment to do horror. I love that.
Mm.
I'm not looking for some complicated logical reason why everything happens. I'm looking for these great like gestalt impressions of the sublime and sort of the Burkean idea of the sublime. And I think
Mm.
Eggers delivers on that wonderfully. So I really loved it. I thought it was fantastic. Um, I think that he inherited a lot of material, and I think he made decisions that were all, to my mind, really great. I think there's a lot of great homages to the Murnau, to the even to the Bram Stoker's Dracula of the 1990s, which I grew up
Yeah, the
with,
Coppola one. Yeah, yeah.
the Coppola one, which I really love, and it's aged in a mixed way in many ways. Um, I thought it was great. I think of the philosopher George Bataille, who talked about a lot about eroticism and death
Mm.
and violence, and how desire is bound up with the little death, and there's so much death and eroticism stuff bound up, and I think Nosferatu delivers on that stuff in a really solid way. But yeah, what do
Yeah,
you think? You're a
absolutely.
filmmaker, man.
Yeah, yeah.
You're the Eggers. You know that dude in a really profound way, and you're a filmmaker yourself. I was also really curious when I was watching, and I was like, man, I wish Andy were here,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
so we could like autopsy the film. And so, what was your takeaway?
Yeah, I mean, I echo, most of the sentiments, really. I mean, I liked it when I saw it in the theater. When I rewatched it last night, I actually liked it even more.
Mhm.
I dare say, maybe even loved it. It's interesting because, the first time I saw it, big, crowded, enthusiastic theater, big screen, great sound, and it was, a great experience. But it kind of left me like a little cold, and it was interesting watching it sort of just on my laptop and like, 720p with my AirPods in. I actually was kind of more on the edge of my seat. It was really strange. I don't know, but
Mm.
maybe it was also because it would also, I watched the Murnau version the night before, and so that was really sort of percolating in my brain a lot. And but yeah, I mean, I think that like, I mean, certainly at the kind of intersection where I'm at, the intersection of kind of filmmaking and history. I feel like, Eggers and his work and his team is just sort of unavoidable in that space. So the cultural impact is, I mean, like, those movies are kind of the cultural touchstone. Rob Eggers is sort of, at this point, it's very much kind of a cliche to say like, well, these movies are historically accurate. It's like, yes, that's been, people have been saying that for 10 years. But I really think that they outdid themselves on this one more than anything. There's a lot about this movie that, I mean, I'm a huge book nerd, which we'll get to. I have literally, this is my copy of Dracula. It's literally the size of the Scholomance textbook in the movie, and it's fully annotated and stuff like that. I'm a huge book nerd, so I've got very particular ideas about sort of like Dracula as a story. So there's nitpicks that I have, like, I guess, but I feel like those are just very much outweighed by the emotional experience of watching this movie and how there's like feelings and images from it that have like stayed with me like after the fact and that I like keep thinking about. Like that's what I think is like makes for truly impactful cinema. And one thing I think was really interesting, one time, Justin, we were talking about Gothic literature and sort of Dracula and Frankenstein and sort of comparing and contrasting that. And I remember you said that you sort of liked Dracula better because it was a forward-thinking book, because these characters used science and technology and sort of the cutting edge of sort of 1890s, modern life in order to basically defeat Dracula. And they use sort of, the power of science and the power of technology to do that. Whereas Frankenstein is sort of very much, in a lot of ways, sort of like a technologically regressive book and a technologically regressive romantic story where it's like some things were not meant to be disturbed by man, some things were not meant to be done, let's not make the bomb, all that kind of stuff. And one thing that I was really thinking about on my latest rewatch of the F.W. Murnau film, the original Nosferatu from 1922, is that Stoker is so preoccupied with the typewriter and the phonograph and all of these amazing new 1890s technologies. Murnau doesn't care about any of that. Like that just could not interest him less. It isn't this sort of tale of modernity triumphing over sort of this primitive medieval past. It's really this much more kind of fundamental kind of tale of good versus evil. Science can't defeat Orlok. Only kind of the blinding sort of, heavenly godlike light of the sun can. So I'm curious sort of like what you think about kind of the role of science and religion in various sort of different takes on this story.
I think this is a great question. I remember we had that conversation, and it was a conversation I've had in my head a lot. That not only did science kill Dracula, but an American did. Like I remember the first time I read, Cowboy,
a Southern boy.
I remember the first time I ever read Dracula. I was like, hold on, a cowboy kills Dracula? Quincy Moore, a Texan? And I was like, not just is it science, but it's America. We think of the story as the exotic Dark Ages East comes to Victorian England, and I'm like, no, it's about America coming to England and killing a vampire. Like it's a particularly weird story in that way.
Yeah.
And so, and to your point, sometimes I think I made the argument that Bram Stoker's Dracula, the book, is a sci-fi novel, not a horror novel. That it's about most people reading that had never heard of blood transfusions and and wax cylinder recorders. It would
Mm.
have been like tech bros writing how to kill a vampire,
Yeah,
and
with
so
AI or something.
with
Yeah.
AI or something, yeah, with CRISPR, and it would have been some kind of it would have been
Yeah.
a totally different. Anyone reading that, and if they weren't on the cutting edge of science, would have found the book very sci-fi, what we would call sci-fi now. Um, and Nosferatu, the Murnau, I think that part of what informs why the occult plays such a huge role in that movie, in that film, and there is some occult stuff in the Stoker novel, right? He goes to Sholomance, and we kind of have a vague idea that Dracula is a necromancer, and we can get more into that. But I think it has everything to do with the fact that Alban Grau is involved in Nosferatu, the movie. And folks who may know this, you may want to do some more reading. And there's an excellent article about this by a good friend of mine, and a practicing occultist, Marco Visconti. And Alban Grau was a member of a very prominent German occult society, the Brotherhood of Saturn. And when you see, and I can't remember the name of the character, with the bald guy with the crazy hair, and he's looking at the
Yeah.
invitation from Nosferatu.
Hair
It's,
knock.
yeah,
Yeah. The
Hernock.
Renfield guy. Yeah.
Yeah, the Renfield character, and it's full of all these bizarre characters. Those are all legitimate occult characters, and it's not an accident because they had an occultist literally working on the film. So it's
Yeah.
not verisimilitude; it is actually just similitude. There,
Yeah.
that stuff is like there are kabbalistic sigils and magic squares and other kinds of things because there actually was a functioning occultist. And I think the fact that Grau was involved in Nosferatu meant that his influence was very much written into the idea of how to deal with Orlok. That this was a question of wizard battles. This is a cult versus a cult. This was a cult versus an exorcist basically,
Mm.
and therefore the framing was totally different than the Stoker novel, because the Stoker novel really is in some level a science versus science versus supernatural kind of. Although Van Helsing is a kind of weird hinge character in many ways.
He's not quite full kind of Paracelsian, but yeah, I mean, he's definitely sort of on the edge, and but at the same time, he is sort of, you get the sense in the novel that sort of Van Helsing's belief in the supernatural was kind of brought about by scientific inquiry. You know what I mean? He's like, he
Yeah,
studied it because it sort of exists in this world.
right.
Yeah.
And that was the attitude of the Victorians. That's why you have these sort of the Psychical Research Society. They were trying to understand these phenomena, like what we would now call ESP or ghosts,
Mm.
using at that time the modern scientific understanding of the world. So there were Van Helsing characters out there, trying to look at magic and all these things through the emerging scientific sort of Darwinian lens.
Yeah.
And but Alban Grau himself was not interested in that.
Yeah.
He was a practicing occultist, and therefore this question became a question of supernatural versus supernatural powers, the power of God and the power of evil. And I think that's
Mm.
an important difference, a fundamental difference between what we might call the Nosferatu mythos and the Dracula mythos. And what I think is interesting is that Eggers picked up on that and ran with it. That what we see Van Helsing doing is really exorcisms, and not just exorcisms, but specifically very medieval style necromantic exorcisms, which we can talk
Mm.
about. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the representation of the magic in Nosferatu is Solomonic, and this is a form of magic in which allegedly going back to Solomon, where one is able to summon demons, bind them to your power, and then use those demons to do things. Solomon famously used the demons to construct the temple in Jerusalem, but you can use them for all kinds of things. And when we see that great sequence where von Franz is basically exorcising Ellen, he invokes angels and demons at the same time. And I think von Franz has a sense that you need to bring out the guns of the Navarone. We're not dealing with just like bring out just good angels. We need
Yeah.
the whole Megillah. We need
We
demons
need
as
some bad
well.
motherfuckers. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like this is not, this is not just like, the angels are not enough here.
And it sort of fits very well in with like the mystic philosophy of Cornelius Agrippa, which you have an amazing 14 parts course on just for free on your YouTube channel. Where, and you say in that course that Agrippa is a Christian. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
He is an occultist and a Christian, but
Right.
he's not a Orthodox Christian, not
Right.
Orthodox as in, the Eastern Church, but he's not sort of your typical Christian, but he is in his own way extremely devout, and sort of the worldview
Right.
that he is espousing and sort of uh the goals that he has, and the fact, just his goal that he wants to purify the human soul in that kind of like,
Mhm.
and we can sort of connect that with alchemy, and and we see Willem Dafoe's character in this film actually doing alchemy in his introductory scene, and yeah, that was a moment of
Whoop, whoop. Here I come. Oh, here I come.
at the screen, and yeah, I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
But
So I will say there was a
yeah,
funny
yeah.
moment in that where Eggers kind of like, and I don't know if it's a fumble, but it's like a faux pas. Like I think Von Franz says the black sulfur will not give me gold tonight.
Yeah, Hermes
And
won't
of
turn
course,
my black sulfur to gold.
yep. And I was like, yeah, of course not, because the black sulfur is the very first stage of the alchemical process. You got 11 more to go, bro. Like, of course,
Oh
like
man.
you're just in the blackening. The blackening is the very earliest step. Um, but I love
So you're
that.
so you're saying that this movie is a complete piece of shit. That it's
Yes,
just,
that's what
yeah.
I'm saying. Yeah,
Yes, it's just completely historically inaccurate.
but I do love the fact that there's a nod. It's a John Dee nod there, where he mentions the Mysteriorium Librum Quinque, the 5 books of mystery, which are books of John Dee. And Eggers
Mm.
had an interesting relationship with a bunch of John Dee and Enochian material going back to the Witch,
The Witch, yeah.
where they're rising into the air and singing
Yeah.
in Enochian. And I've heard, although I've not seen, that in an earlier draft of the screenplay, um, that Orlok isn't speaking Dacian, which is a extinct version of the language of that time period, sort of a Proto-Romanian. But
Mhm.
and I've heard that in a 2016 draft, Orlok speaks Enochian, which I would have
Mm.
loved to have seen if they had have translated
Yeah.
Orlok's speech into Enochian, which would have been, I think, yeah, just like otherworldly and weird, but it's not what we got.
Yeah. Well, I know, but I mean, it's still very cool. And yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a very, I mean, obviously in the original Nosferatu, you've got such, incredible performances. I mean, Max
Mhm.
Schreck, it really struck me the physical kind of acting in that movie in this latest rewatch. Max Schreck's movements are just so like, he's so like light-footed and deliberate. There's like an insect kind of quality to the way that he moves. Like when he
Mhm.
comes out of the shadows at the beginning, it's just, he's like very spider-like and very strange. And and the actor who plays Hernock in that original film is like doing parkour like over buildings and stuff. And it's just a very physical performances all around. But and this remake definitely sort of continues that tradition, most notably, and I know a lot of people are talking about this, Lily Rose Depp's performance, which is just like mind-blowing, the
Yeah.
physicality of that. But it is very much in that context of like demonic possession, and and this is sort of to your point, it's like this isn't like a materialist struggle. This is not something that's like okay, so these are the rules of the vampire. This is what the vampire can and cannot do. Oh, he can't cross running water. He can't do this. He can't do that. I mean, the book is full of that stuff. Van Helsing is saying, oh, he has a criminal brain. He's got a child brain. Let's like psychoanalyze him. Let's find out exactly how he works. Basically, let's use sort of the scientific method to try and basically kind of out logic this monster, kind of bring him into the light of science, and then we can kind of better know how to defeat him. And whereas the Nosferatu films, it is much more of a spiritual fight, a much more of a spiritual struggle. You mentioned the sort of the little death and the sexuality aspects of it, and I feel like there's this sort of danger in some of these horror films that are sort of structured in this kind of way where it kind of almost can turn into a kind of Christian morality tale, or sort of sex equals corruption, or sex is bad. And, and I feel like certainly we see some horror movies that are kind of a little bit satanic panicky in that way. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Where it's just like the hidden demon stuff and like, you know, the brave investigator who sort of finds it out. I feel like, you know, even though I love the first season of True Detective, I feel like something like True Detective is a good example of that, where it's like a little bit satanic panicky. You know, it's just like, you know, I'm sure a lot of QAnon people sort of think of themselves as like Rust Cole, you know, smoking and investigating and, you know, but this very much isn't that. I feel like this gets to something that's just much more sort of primal and emotional.
Right.
And that
Yeah,
and that's
medieval
so
problems
cool.
require
Yeah.
medieval solutions. Most of the esoteric stuff we see is evil. I wish
Mm.
we could have seen a little bit more of, you know, von Franz, who's an expert in Paracelsus, and Agrippa using his knowledge of the occult more explicitly to combat the demonic version of the occult by Orlok.
Mm.
Because we definitely see the great sequences where him dipping the pin in his blood, and there's the big magic circle in the ground, and
Mhm.
I feel like we could have used. I think that, you know, we need to see more esotericism as optimism, esotericism
Yeah.
as goodness, as a connection to the divine. That's Agrippa, right? Agrippa is
Yeah.
the occult as a connection to the
He's the
divine.
benevolent occultist. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely he's the arch benevolent occultist, and I wish, you know, I of course I'm happy to see a name drop as much as the next guy, right? But I wish we could have seen some Agrippism
Mm.
in the film, and that's not a criticism of Eggers and Nosferatu. It's an opportunity for, you know, people like you and me to work together to like say like, let's depict alchemy, because maybe there's a screenplay we're working on to depict
Maybe.
alchemy. Maybe, you know, let's depict esotericism, depict occultism as a force for good. Um, because I do think that is a way in which the Satanic Panic is still pervasive in Hollywood, and I really feel like
Yeah.
that trope is it's kind of done. Not only is it done, it's harmful because it's really
Yeah.
harmful for occult practitioners, right? This is
Yes,
and maybe
absolutely.
I'll say about this for just a second. You know, I think of Marco Visconti. I think of other people who are practicing occultists for whom that is a path by which they connect to the divine, and for it to only be depicted as a way of demons doing bad stuff and killing people, and I feel like, again, this is Satanic Panic territory.
You know, it sort of makes sense just because it kind of falls on kind of either side of the kind of
Right.
culture war fault line, I guess. But it's sort of either one or the other. It's either in horror, it's either kind of satanic panicky, and it's sort of, you know, we need to like investigate this like sinister occult stuff that's going on, and they're killing
Right.
babies, and you know, they're you know, they're burning the women, they're raping the churches, you know, they're killing babies, all this sorts of stuff. Or it's kind of the, you know, Coppola's Dracula, you know, or Sudbury Devil version of it, which is like Satanism, the occult, magic as sort of this liberatory, sort of countercultural sort of thing, right? And that's
Right.
very much on our modern kind of political fault lines.
Mhm.
It's, you know, the sort of the progressive and the regressive kind of depictions of magic. And you know, and of course, you know, in this film, it's just you know, Eggers completely uninterested in that. You know, it is kind of going back to that sort of original thing. The trouble is that, you know, we've inherited kind of the legacy of like King James. You know, we sort of we you know, King James's thoughts on this matter of like it's all evil, even the people who like think they're doing good, they're all bad. You know, that's what we're kind of
Yeah.
have culturally inherited.
Agrippa, right? He defended a witch. He put
Mm.
his life on the
Yeah.
line to defend an accused witch because he felt her rights were being violated. You know, when von Franz invokes Agrippa and Paracelsus, it's easy to see just sort of a romantic, ancient, you know, weird occult stuff. But when you get into the hood of that, Paracelsus and Agrippa were revolutionaries. They were radical progressives. The sequence in the very beginning, which I think is the most enigmatic sequence in the whole film in many ways, like how ultimately Ellen summons Nosferatu. Agrippa actually warns people about this. Agrippa says, "Look, if you go summoning spirits, be very careful because when you summon spirits, your voice has to go up through the sublunar world where all the demons live, and it has to reach up to the planetary and then to the celestial realm. But at any place along the way, a demon can grab on to your summoning and they will answer you. And you may not, you may grab a hold of something that you did not intend to."
Mm.
And there's this moment of Ellen, you know, sort of calls out in lonely desperation for something. And I think, I mean, again, I wonder, you know, Eggers is a smart guy. I wonder how much he's reading something like Agrippa or something. And it seems like that's what she did.
Mm.
She calls out, and what answers is not what she wanted to have answered. It's this horrifying demonic thing. There's people like there's a sequence where they're laughing at von Franz about, oh, it's a demon.
Yeah.
And I wonder, from a metaphysical point of view, did she get contact with a demon that resurrected this entity of Orlok? And von Franz correctly diagnoses it as Orlok as a demon, which is very different than calling him a vampire. Vampires were a very specific kind of mythology. But the fact that von Franz is very insistent, no, we're dealing with something demonic here, which means, of course, that you're not dealing with just a vampire, because they showed you how to deal with vampires in the movie. They deal with a vampire. But I do think that Orlok is something at a different register. I do think that he is vampiric, but certainly not merely a vampire, because those seem pretty easy to dispense with. We see those Romanian, the Roma and Sinti people dispensing of one.
It's so funny though, those scenes with that in the sort of little village tavern in Romania at the beginning, because I have to say, Justin, like 12 of the old ladies in that scene are just a dead ringer for my grandma. My Serbian grandmother, so the lady going, pray, pray, pray. It's just like, yeah, hey, Baba. Well, before we get kind of too deep into the weeds here, I do want to talk about the specific sort of occult symbolism. We mentioned the paper that Herr Nock has at the beginning of the 1922 film, that Orlok has that great shot where he's sort of like looking up like that. The seal in the new film, the conjuration circle that Herr Nock and again also a very wonderfully deranged performance has, like, sort of, what's the history behind that? Is that sort of based on something specific, or what did you kind of pick up on?
A couple things. I mean, there's a lot to unpack. Nosferatu's seal is a multi-pointed star, and it seems like there are two Ouroboros, snakes eating their own tails, which are classic alchemical symbols of the unity of all being. And then inside of that, we get some what appear to be symbols that are coming out of the astral magic tradition, texts like Picatrix. It's kind of hard because they're pretty abstract. But the two core images is at the very center of the seal seems to be the symbol for an alchemical symbol for Earth, although it has a point in the middle, and I'm not sure quite exactly what that means. But I mean, he's buried in the Earth, and he has to be in the Earth, so maybe it has something to do with that. And then around it, written in a sort of very archaic Slavonic alphabet, which we also see in some of the documents he draws up, which are written in this very sort of old Russian, Slavonic sort of calligraphy, where they combine letters into other letters. We see the divine name Zalmoxis, and Zalmoxis was the very ancient god of the Dacians. And so we get the sense, and this is a kind of a Lovecraftian kind of thing, where Orlok worships the old gods. Orlok is not, this is whatever he's involved in is not just anti-Christian, it's pre-Christian. He is an observer of this very archaic Dacian religion. We don't know much about Zalmoxis as an entity. There's a couple illustrations, but we don't know much about him. But the fact that he seals documents with the name of a pre-Christian god means, again, that Nosferatu is not playing ball. Like Orlok's not playing, and again, you get the sense that von Franz, he's kind of bringing a knife to a gunfight. Like, he's having to deal with, he's using this very Christian kind of occultism with Paracelsus and Agrippa and kind of ad hoc exorcisms. But Orlok is something much older. He's coming from this much more chthonic kind of religiosity, and really the old gods.
In the book, there's a much more kind of like again, this rule-based idea of vampires, where it's just like, the vampire bites you, vampire drinks your blood, you drink their blood. After a certain amount of time, it sort of infects you, and then you die, and then you get resurrected, and all that kind of stuff. Like, nobody in the Murnau film or in this film gets turned into a vampire. You know what I mean? Right. It's not like, it isn't like, True Blood or the Anne Rice books, or, or Twilight, or, or kind of the more sort of zombie inspired sort of science-based vampire
Contagion idea.
Like, the Contagion idea, the Guillermo del Toro show, The Strain, which was like kind of very much kind of capitalizing on The Walking Dead, the popularity of The Walking Dead. uh, you know, is very much literally, it's like it is a disease. It's like a worm that gets in your blood, you know.
Right.
But yeah, there is this. He is sort of much more than a vampire. He is this sort of this force of nature. He is like literally death himself, and like and in the
And
Murnau
desire,
film
I think.
especially. Yeah, and desire.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and desire.
exactly.
It's like ravenous desire. It's not just
Yeah.
it's
Well, he
death
says like
desire.
I'm an
It's death
appetite.
drive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Well, and like and you don't know and it's like less of a factor in this film, but it definitely was in the original and definitely in the Herzog movie from the 70s. This sort of idea of the plague, you know, and in the 1922 version, it's like you honestly don't know kind of where Orlok ends and the plague begins. It is
Right.
like he brings the plague, he is the plague. Is it something that's just like he's spreading just by virtue of his evil, or is it actually vampirism that people are sort of mistaking for plague? You know, again, like you said, it's very fever dreamy. It's not explained. It's not like,
Yeah.
okay, here's the world building. It's meant to be kind of more felt than like understood, if that makes sense. And I think this your theory, Justin, of him being sort of essentially kind of recently reanimated, or you know, sort of willed into existence by Ellen calling out, actually kind of puts the character's kind of objective in like a lot more context. Ellen is just entirely what he's after. It's just this very single-minded obsession with her. And you know, and Von Franz says to her in the movie, like, you were like born into the occult. I'm but like an able tourist in the metaphysical. So there's sort of this sense that like, yeah, that her spirit, you know, kind of in a sort of Bella-esque sense, you know, her blood is like unique, you know, and there's this very sort of there's this sort of irresistible pull that Orlok has to her.
Nock refers to her as a sylph.
Mm.
At one point, he calls her a sylph. That's a Paracelsian idea. The sylphs are elemental creatures. They're not human.
Mm.
And the fact that he like refers to her as a sylph, and also that the Orlok constantly reminds her that she's not of this world. I don't think she's of this world.
Yeah.
I do think the fact that she's able to conjure Orlok means, and the fact that that she's, you know, a practicing occultist refers to her as a not quite human character,
Yeah.
tells us. And also just like the way that she's never quite integrated into human life. Ellen's always on the outside. She's always, she's not quite a wife. She's not quite a friend. She's hearing things that no one else can hear. She's interacting with force. I don't think she's completely human either. I think there's some kind of otherness about her as well. And again, when Eggers is not he's a careful person, and the fact that he uses a Paracelsian term to describe her means that she's part of the supernatural ecosystem in the same way that Orlok is, and these other kind of creatures are as well. But she's battling it, right? She doesn't want to be totally in that ecosystem, and you know, wins and loses that battle in various ways. But yeah, I think that in the classic romantic tradition, right, what we get is we get the intrusion of the irrational, that we get the intrusion into our world that is very carefully curated of the sublime. And, you know, there's no accident that Eggers is carefully using like Caspar David Friedrich's art as storyboards. How many shots of you know, the man over the mist, or you know, whatever. Like those shots are all like storyboarded out of this highly romantic embrace of the sublime. And you know, the sublime is, you know, anything of you know, of Burke, the sublime is all about how it overwhelms a human being. That you know, and it's not pleasant, it's unpleasant, it's highly scary.
I love that take about Ellen, because like you know, you have Aaron Taylor Johnson's character, who's like the ultimate rationalist, right? He's like the last to like give in to the idea that this might be supernatural, and he's like physically repulsed by her like multiple times in the movie. She like takes his hand for whatever, and he's like, "Ugh," you know, he like you know, he just like cannot be around her, and she's like, why do you hate me? And it's like, well, yeah, it's that would totally fit in with that, where he's kind of this like ultimate, you know, you know, he's this rational bourgeois, you know, shipbuilder guy, you know, and he's like the most resistant to it. So yeah, that's
and even ultimately he gives into a kind of extremely unnatural kind of you know, he engages in necrophilia at the end.
Yeah.
I mean, he what is more horrifyingly unnatural than, and even he is forced to the altar of the unnatural.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I do love that at the very end. His desires are also, again, Nosferatu is infecting everybody. Like even he's
Yeah.
driven to this sort of like what is more horrifying to the bourgeois than to be, basically making out with the corpse of your wife in the crypt or with your children. So,
Yeah, pretty intense.
yeah, it's
um,
yeah, again, like again, the idea that this sort of death desire, this death lust infects everything.
yeah. Well,
Um,
and Death and the Maiden, like the last shot of the
yeah,
movie is like
of
a
course.
classic Death and the Maiden
Yep,
painting, Yeah.
exactly.
Well, I want to go back to the book for just a second and some of the film adaptations that have been made, over the years. So one thing that I thought was really interesting about the Castle Dracula sequence in the new Nosferatu, which I have to say is not my favorite sort of take on that sort of the first four chapters of the book.
Mm,
But what I did find really interesting about it is that there's sort of like a lot of filmmakers struggle with that sequence in adaptations
mm,
because in the book, when Jonathan Harker first comes to Castle Dracula, Dracula is kind of just an eccentric, kind of off-putting, kind of weird, but like generally like courteous and normal old man.
mhm.
You know what I mean? And it's like gradually like he kind of lets the mask slip and you sort of and Harker kind of becomes more and more aware, okay, there's something like very wrong with this dude. Um and and Jonathan Harker in the book is like not an idiot. You know what I mean? He's like he's a smart, perceptive guy, and he's like a professional. He's there to do a job, but like when shit starts to get weird, he picks up on it. Whereas in most film adaptations, there's like always this imbalance between the performance of Dracula and the performance of the Harker character, where and God love him, but Gary Oldman made probably my favorite Dracula, but like Gary Oldman is so guilty of this, and so many other Dracula people are too. Klaus Kinski is like the most guilty of this. The actor playing Dracula, like as soon as they open the door and say welcome to my home, they're just like up to 11, welcome to my home. They're just like clearly the most evil person who has ever lived, and Jonathan Harker is just walking in going just like, oh,
With the great butt.
yeah, yeah. It's just clearly clearly a monster.
Yeah.
And Jonathan Harker's like, yo, what's up? How much rent do you pay in this place? He's just acting like everything's normal. And Klaus Kinski, it's like the Werner Herzog version, which I know many people love, and I'm not trying to shit on anybody's tastes here, but I find it just deeply goofy and deeply silly because Klaus Kinski is just chewing the scenery and just
Yeah, because Klaus Kinski is Klaus Kinski. Like,
yeah, of course, yeah. But the guy playing
psychopath on
Harker,
film. Yeah.
he's just like the guy playing Harker is just like, oh, that's interesting. He's just like completely oblivious to the fact that this guy is obviously the most evil motherfucker who has ever lived. So there's like an inherent comedy there, and of course Keanu Reeves, again, great actor, but I've seen many strange things already. It's like very oh god, it's just very silly. But it's also kind of part of the reason why I love that movie is, and it is my favorite Dracula film, the '92 version.
I agree.
Think the
I'm
fact
the same way.
that
I love that version.
I think the fact that it's so bizarre and uneven just like adds to the charm. It just makes it so much of like a of a more emotional experience. And again, it's like it's not obsessed with like the world building and like how does the vampire work. It's just like you're just supposed to feel it. But what I really appreciated about the 2024 Nosferatu was that Parker/Hutter gets to Castle Dracula and it's immediately just a living nightmare.
Mhm.
And Nicholas Hoult, his performance, I think, is brilliant because he is matching Bill Skarsgård's performance. You know what I mean? It isn't this like lopsided thing. And you can kind of go the other way too. Like in there are a couple of TV versions of Dracula from the 70s. One with, I think, Richard Jourdan was the actor, as a French actor, and another with Christopher Lee, where Christopher Lee produced it and he had a mustache and he was like, I want to make like the most accurate Dracula ever. I think it's called Count Dracula. But he had a mustache and everything. But it's sort of the other end where it's like very much this kind of game of cat and mouse, where it's like, okay, where where Dracula is at first normal and then kind of lets the mask slip, kind of like it is in the book. But in this one, and in, I would say to an extent, the original 1922 version, Hutter is just immediately terrified of this guy. Like he immediately knows something's wrong, and Orlok basically makes no attempt to kind of hide his true nature. And so kind of I think what and again, as a book nerd, it kind of grieves me because I feel like we're kind of missing out on what I would consider to be like kind of the juiciest and most creepy sort of chapters of the book. But I also understand it's a different vision, right? But at the same time, I think it is like genuinely frightening because of Nicholas Holt's performance, because he's like completely
Sweating.
there. Yeah, he's sweating and he's just like completely, yes, Bill Skarsgård, it sounds like a crazy person, but like Nicholas Holt is reacting accordingly. And I just think that was like a really interesting choice.
I also like the fact that Nosferatu was huge and hulking in those in those sequences, and but also he seems incredibly powerful, but also that he's kind of wheezing and struggling to talk in a way that he seems
He's like
he's
sick. Yeah.
he's like barely existing. He's struggling to exist. And I love the more I've watched it another time now, the more you get the sense that he's something inside a corpse. He's not actually. He's whatever Orlok is. He's carrying around this corpse, and this is what's great about the fact that the Murnau had to violate, got in trouble with the copyright stuff and had to change everything.
Yeah, poor Mrs. Stoker. Yeah.
And so we get a different cocktail, Dracula cocktail. And I think this is a really good thing about the vampire mythology is that if we look at the actual really early origins of the vampire, and I've done an episode on at least the early origin of the vampire as far as it's been translated in English and French, is that there isn't actually a coherent story about what vampires are. There's a folklore field, and Western Europeans sort of made what they made of it. Bram Stoker made what he made of it, and Murnau made what he made of it. And I do like the fact that we do have this sort of force of nature version, and I think that what Eggers does is bring this tidal wave of desire. And there's a part of me that if I were ContraPoints or something, there's a whole Lacanian analysis that I will not torture anyone with at this moment. But there's a Lacanian read of this as Lacan famously said that love is giving a thing you don't have to someone who doesn't want it, and that desire is all about this sort of displacement of want, that we're all wanting things that when we desire someone, we don't desire them, we desire, and they are the placeholder for that. And when as Oscar Wilde said, the most terrible thing is not getting what you want, it's not getting what you want, is getting it, because the thing you think you want is never there. And I think that this is true in Nosferatu, is that there are these chains of desire, and that no one's getting what they want, because what they want isn't achievable. Ellen's not getting what she wants. Orlok's not getting what he wants. Von Franz, the bourgeois shipbuilder, Hutter. There's a great Lacanian analysis of the fact that this is a purloined letter. Everyone's desiring, no one's getting it, and that's driving them into a cycle of erotic self-destruction, which I, as a student of Bataille and Lacan and all that stuff, that's there's the occult esoterica sledge who's like, and then there's like the Lacanian that too.
The pervert sledge.
The pervert sledge. Oh yeah, which is absolutely there. And so I love this fact that that no one's, and again what we get the first image we get of Nosferatu or Orlok is this huge hulking, he's like 9 feet tall, and at the end
precisely,
shriveled, impotent.
Precisely.
He's drank deep of the very thing he wanted, and at the end of it, he's.
Well, I mean, there's a phallic kind of sort of, read on that too, where, I mean, the sexuality aspect, I mean, of course I mean, you've seen my movie, so, but like, I mean, I think and honestly, I feel like I could have used more freaky, horrible sex. I mean, it's why I love the Coppola version so much, actually, just because it's just so hot and so wet and so fleshy. But I think this was an interesting kind of take on the vampire, because it definitely leaned into the erotic elements, but I think, by Eggers' own admission in interviews, if I'm remembering them correctly, he said many times, that he wanted to go back to that original sort of Eastern European folkloric vampire, which is very much a non-sexual being, right? There's like
Yeah.
very little sexual sort of undertones to the original vampire folklore. It's only kind of the perverted Western Europeans who projected all of their sexual neuroses.
Firstly, lesbians, actually, right? The earliest sexy vampire are mostly lesbians, yeah. So it's a very queer, and also Bram Stoker also probably
this man belongs to me. It's
there's some evidence of of Stoker perhaps being a queer person. So I think this and also I agree with you. I really like the 1990s Coppola version, because it is like explicitly very horny, like that, and you do get glimpses of that. But what I like about the Eggers version, even better than that one, is that the eroticism is like pure desire, and like when it's pure desire, you can look past the fact that Orlok is physically horrible.
Gross. Yeah.
Like it's just like Gary Oldman in the 90s, man. Like who doesn't get some Gary Oldman, 90s Gary Oldman? Like give me some 90s Gary Oldman, but this sort of hulking, rotting, creature, clothes rotting off of him. That I think is like, again, like it's desire writ large. It's desire ipso facto, not eroticism in the sense of I'm horny for you, but in the sense of like the horror, the id, right? The Freudian id. It's the desire that drives you to destruction, the death drive of the id that desires in a pure way, beyond aesthetics or something like that. I think Eggers, I really appreciated that about this version of it.
And Orlok does, he does kind of go to his death, it's like nothing is keeping him from Ellen's blood. You know what I mean? It's like, that great moment where he kind of like looks up and he's like, oh, is the sun coming up? It's like, oh God, he just cannot stop.
Yeah. There's not even like post-nut clarity.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like there is like, I'm like, wow, this man is like, he is taking it.
Determined. Yeah.
He is taking it. And again, that's Lacan said that, all authentic desire destroys the desire. And Orlok is that. And I think Ellen is too.
When we talk about sort of historical authenticity and historical detail in like a fiction film, I think that's kind of, it's not just there to like, oh, look how smart I am and look how much of a nerd I am about this stuff. It's there to sort of add depth to the characters and add sort of a reality and a truth to the characters. And I think, we're very lucky. And I think, again, people watching this can probably agree. And it probably, if you're a fan of mine, a fan of Justin's, probably to your taste too, that sort of this level of research and this level of just particularity really just lends itself to just a much more well-realized, truthful story. You know what I mean? And that's what it's all about, man. Story comes first. And, and as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, you've got to make it feel true, even if it's the most fantastical thing in the world, even if it's the crazy fucking necrophile vampires. It's just got to feel real. It's got to feel true to kind of the human experience. And, and 99% of the people who are watching Nosferatu, are not us, right? They're not, doing the Leo point and going, woo, every time alchemy is mentioned. But, just the fact they're not picking up on this stuff consciously, but it's like, it just adds to the level of like, of weight to this sort of story and to the reality of these characters. So, I think we're like very lucky to and I'm very happy, that a film like this that does have the names of the most obscure demons you could possibly imagine. It has a main character, talking about how, Hermes is not, granting him gold today, is making $1 bajillion, and it's, it was the number one movie in America over Christmas. That's like amazing. You know what I mean? And
I totally agree.
And yeah, just so happy that a film this dorky is like doing so well, and that people are into it and people are responding to it.
Eggers has had this film in him for a long time. I think even in college or something, he directed a version of Nosferatu. Like this is a long gestating baby of
passion
his.
project. Yeah.
And I'm just really happy for him. I'm just really happy to see an artist and a creator who has a vision, who has a real commitment to authenticity, to be able to realize that vision at a big budget level. I'm glad for him. I'm like, good for you.
Well, on that note, maybe we should wrap it up. Thank you everybody for watching. If you haven't already, subscribe to Esoterica. Seriously, do yourself a favor. And yeah, we will see you down the road. Bye, everybody.